Okay, so again, thank you very much for this invitation and good evening, everyone. So my name is Arnaud Glo again, and what here we are going to present you with Amazigh is can be decomposed in two parts. So first, I will introduce a quite general framework called RGCCA for Regularized Generalized Canonical Correlation Analysis that will allow to perform a multi-block and multi-way data analysis. So we'll introduce soon the different these different concepts, and then we will talk about some beginning results on Amazigh's data. So this worked on the framework RGCCA was partly performed during my PhD at the Laboratory of Signal and System at Central Chapelec, and in the Brainomics team at Neurospin. So with Vincent Froin and Cathy Philippe at Neurospin, and Laurent Lemposquet and Arthur Tanenos, my thesis director, here at Central Chapelec. So what we are going to be interested in here is the analysis of data matrices. So here, most of the time, the data we are interested in can be organized like that. So we have different individuals, subject or observation, that are measured through J different variables. But sometimes we can have more complex data sets where we have a collection of matrices. So here we have L different matrices. And the particularity here is that we have the same subjects. So if I take a line here, the same line through the different matrices, we have the same subject that is observed through different modalities. On such data set, we may ask the question of the interactions. So what can be the different interactions that exist between the different data sets, between the different modalities. So this first structure is called the multi-block structure. A second object we will be interested in today is what we call the multi-way structure. So it's a particular, a different case than before, where, for example, we can have one matrix that can be organized as a tensor, where we have here A different observations through J variables measured at K different occasions. So we will see later an example, but it's the case, for example, when we are dealing with electroencephalography data. So for the different subjects, we can measure the J variables are associated, for example, to the time, and the occasions to the electrodes. So we are measuring through different, at a specific time ranges, through the different electrodes. The last structure that we are going to be interested in today is the sparse structure. So, for example, sometimes we have a really big number of variables in comparison to the number of observation, and we may want to select the variables because we can know, for example, that we have a specific subset of variables that may be implicated in the phenomenon we want to explain. So this is called the sparsity or the variable. This is called sparsity or variable selection. So here, what we are going to be interested in today is to propose a framework that can both handle the multi-block structure, but also the multi-block and multi-way structure, or the multi-block and the sparse structure. And this framework is actually called Regularized Generalized Canonical Correlation Analysis. Okay, so here, what we are, the specific for the presentation of RGCCA, I will take the example of the specific data set that Amazigh will present you later. So this data set, so quickly, this data set is composed of three different blocks, three different modalities. The first one that is associated to microRNAs. a second one to messenger RNAs, and a third block which is associated to the clinical data. So here we have the same number of individuals associated to each block, and they are measured for 3 different modalities: microRNA, messenger RNA, and clinical data. So I have some beeps, so I don't know if there are some questions. No. Okay, so I continue. And for example, in this, the objective of the multi-block data analysis is to find block components that can summarize both the information that is encompasses in one block, but also that the information that can explain the link with the other blocks. So in fact, how do we compute these components? So what we want to do when we are performing multi-block data analysis is to extract what we call a component, so Y1, Y2, Y3. So here we extract one component per block. And how do we compute this component? In fact, it can be computed like that. So it's a linear combination of the different variables. So Y1 will be, here we want to estimate weights W11 until W1J1 that will allow to compute this component, which is a linear combination of all the different variables that which this block is made of. This is the same for the second block component. So we want to extract a block component Y2, which can be computed as a linear combination of the different variables. So here the variables are composed of the messenger RNA, and for the last block here we want to find a linear combination of the clinical data. In terms of vocabulary, here this is called the block components, and here this is called the block weight vectors. So in fact, we want to extract these block components that are computed like that. So this is a matrix product between the block and the block weight vector. And each component should fulfill two goals. First, we want that the block components well explain their block, but also well explain the connection with the other blocks. And so how can we do that? There is multiple possibility. We can either maximize a correlation between the different components extracted. So here, a component is associated to the first block and the second block, the first block and the third block, etc. Or we can maximize the covariance, so between each of the different extracted components. So the different the multi-block literature proposes to either focus on the maximization of the correlation of the covariance. So here, if we take a quick look at a quick overview of the multi-block literature, so different sets of methods was proposed. A different set of methods were proposed, where each time we have here the associated criterion to the different method. And so, for example, here this method focuses on maximizing the correlation. So here we want to extract block components such that the correlation is maximized. And here, for example, for some core, we maximize the correlation. Here the square of the correlation, and here the absolute value of the correlation. Here, all the blocks are connected to one another. Another possibility is to maximize the covariance. So we have the same type of method. So, but this time, instead of maximizing a correlation, we maximize the covariance. And in fact, here I recall this formula. So the correlation, the covariance the square covariance can be written as a product between the variance of each component and the correlation between the two. So in fact, I can change here these three criterion, and replace them by the covariance. So here I went from the covariance, the correlation to the covariance, and I just added here some constraints. So I want that the variance of each component is equal to 1. So in fact, this writings and this one are exactly the same. I just add this constraint in order here to specify the covariance in the criterion and put this constraint into and put that I want into the constraint that the variance is equal to 1. And here, for example, a specific coefficient was added, which is the CJK, CJK, which will specify if we actually do take into account a connection between blocks. So here, all the CJK are equal to 1, and here they are specified so that when they are equal to 1, we actually do take into account a connection between blocks, and when they are equal to 0, we do not take into account this connection. So as you can see, this table subsum a lot different methods that are well known in the multi-block literature, and by those different steps. So first we start with correlation-based criterion, then covariance-based criterion, and then we can see that actually there is quite general formulation that encompasses these different methods. And actually, this allowed to propose a more general optimization problem, which is actually the optimization problem which is of the interest in the method called RGCCA, for regularized generalized canonical correlation analysis, which proposes to maximize this criterion. So which is, we want to maximize actually the covariance between all of the extracted block components, subject to either the constraint that we want the variance of the components equal to 1, or the square the block weights vector to be normalized. So here, CJK is actually a network of connection between blocks, which is defined by the user. So CJK is equal to 1 if you want to take into account a link between two blocks, and 0 otherwise. And J is any convex and differentiable function. And actually, in the different method I showed you before, J is equal to either the identity, the square function, or the absolute value. Okay, but actually, in the framework of RGCCA, there is a last. So this is the method, and we want to maximize this criterion subject to these constraints. But there is a last step of generalization in this framework, because as you can see, there is actually a step between we can choose either this constraint or this one. So there is a last generalization step which allows to continuously go from this constraint to this one. And in order to understand this last generalization step, I will take the example of the special case of two blocks. So here I have written the optimization criterion of RGCCA in the case of two blocks, where J is equal to the square function, and I want actually my block weights to be normalized. So this method is called PLS2. And if I write the counterpart where I want the variance of my extracted components to be equal to 1, I have here the method which is called canonical correlation analysis. Okay, and as you can see, so here, in fact, as the variance is equal to 1, we are no more maximizing a covariance, but a correlation. And as you can see, there is a word between the two, and it can be fulfilled by regularized canonical correlation analysis, where we can introduce here a scalar parameter tau, which will vary between 0 and 1, and which, when tau is equal to 0, we are maximizing a correlation, and when it is equal to 1, we are maximizing a covariance. So tau can be seen as a continuous parameter like that, where when we go to 0, we are doing CCA, and where we go towards 1, we are doing PLS. So maybe, so with a quick figure, I can represent what's actually happening here. So in fact, if I take a small example where I have two blocks. So here, first block composed of two variables, and then a second block composed of only one variable. And I want to extract, so my block components here, y1, which is equal to this linear combination between the two variables. And here, my second block component, which is actually will be proportional. So here, for proportional to this second variable. So I generated my variables like that. So actually, the two variables are centered, and they have this true covariance matrix. And here for this variable, it's actually a variable which encodes the classes. So it's equal to 0, and it's only linked to the first variable of this block. So it's equal to 0 when x1 is negative and 1 otherwise. So if I represent here the two variables of x1 in regards of x2, I have this cloud of points, actually, and I added the variable z by adding this color. So here I have z equal to 1, here z equal to 0. So what I will show you is for different methods, the value of this block component. So if I apply a PCA, for example, I will take the direction that maximizes the variance, so which is actually a linear combination where the weights are equal, because here, as the two variables have a correlation of 0.5, in fact, the first bisectrice is associated to the direction that maximizes the variance here. If I apply PLS as we are maximizing a covariance, which is a product between a correlation and a variance, we have actually a trade-off. We are going to find a trade-off between maximizing the variance and the correlation. And if I apply CCA, I will maximize the correlation between the two components. So in fact, I will have a direction that only characterizes the first variable, because Z is only linked, is defined through this first variable. And where is RCCA? Actually, RCCA is there. And thanks to this scalar parameter tau, then I can continuously go between PLS and CCA. Okay, so in order this short break, in order to show you the last formulation of RGCCA. So we want to maximize this criterion subject to those constraints, where here tau, a first interpretation of the parameter tau can be seen as a continuum between the correlation and the covariance, where tau is equal to 0, we are maximizing a correlation criterion, and when it's equal to 1, we are maximizing a covariance criterion. Another interpretation of this parameter tau actually is linked to a reformulation of these constraints, where we can put, in fact, the weights to factorize the weights, and then we have this formula that appears, which can be seen as a regularized version of the sample covariance matrix. And so tau can be seen as the regularized parameter of the sample covariance matrix. And when tau is equal to 0, it favors correlation. And when tau is equal to 1, actually it favors stability, because in a high dimensional case, this estimation, so estimating the covariance matrix by the sample covariance matrix, can actually be a really bad estimate. And in a really high dimension, it can be, in order to favor stability in our model, it can be easier to estimate the sample covariance matrix by the identity matrix. And actually, there exists some formulas, for example, the Schaffer and Schremer formula, in order to find an optimal determination of this shrinkage parameter.
Can I ask you a question, Arnaud?
Yes.
So it's a bit of a basic question, but I understand how it optimizes between correlation and covariance. Is there any rule of thumb on what is more interesting between covariance and correlation, or are you just by permutations and algorithmic strategies setting the toe? I mean, in an extreme case, what is more interesting to look at between the two?
In an extreme case, in the case that we have a really high number of variables in the model, so in really high dimension, we most of the time advise to define tau to 1 and to maximize a covariance, because otherwise the results are really unstable, because we have to, I mean, we will estimate this covariance matrix, which is composed of a really high number of parameters to estimate. So if the number of variables is equals to j, we have to estimate j, a number of parameters close to the square of j, and this estimation is really unstable. So in this case, we favor the case where we set tau to 1. Otherwise, in a more classical cases, so not necessarily in high dimension, it can be interesting indeed to use, for example, a cross validation in order to set this tau.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so if I here this just disable to summarize a little the first step of this presentation. So here, this is the optimization problem we are interested in, and we can see that depending on the constraints, we'll have a different type of method. So here I introduce this constraint. So M actually is equal to this matrix, and in fact, in the framework of RGCCA, M can be any positive definite matrix. And so when we maximize this optimization optimization criterion subject to those constraints, we get the method that is called RGCCA. And we will see that when we will change the different constraints, actually, we can add more structures. We can ask more. We can take into account different structures into this framework. And so I will go on to the next part of this framework, which aims at adding the multi-way structure, so proposing a way to handle both multi-block and multi-way structure. So this method is called multi-way generalized canonical correlation analysis. So again, here, if I subsum RGCCA with a small scheme, so what we wish to do is to extract from each block a component y, which both represent well this block and the interaction predefined by the user. So these different coefficients are defined by the users with the other blocks. So this component should represent well this block and the interaction with the others. And so this is what RGCCA aims to do. And when we go from that to a multi-way part, so we can have all or at least one of the different blocks that is organized here as a third order tensor. So again, J is the number of variables that are measured through K different occasions. So here it's what we call lateral slices, and here frontal slices. And the big question now is how, from a tensor, can I compute now my block components? So before it was a linear combination of the variables, but now how do I take into account this multi-way structure? So in fact, I will take a specific tensor, and I will just flavor it by a specific example in electroencephalography. So let's say that I have an electroencephalography block. So where here I have the subject that I measure through different time samples through different channels. So in fact, I can organize my tensor like that. So I will have the different fibers. So each fiber is composed of specific of the same number of subjects, but is associated to a specific channel and a specific time point. And here, this fiber can be called, for example, EEG associated to the time J and the channel K. A way to take into account the multi-way structure is to compute a block weight vector, in fact, two block weight vectors. The first one associated to the time dimension, which is the same length of the time mode, time dimension. And for example, this, the weight number J will weight the fibers we are considering. And to extract a block weight vector associated to the channels, where the weight number K will weight also the same fiber. And so here, how do we compute now the block components? So in fact, the block components is composed as a weighted sum of all of the fibers. So depending on the fibers we are in, we will weight it by the specific, the weight associated to the specific channel and the specific time points. So in fact, this can be rewritten like that. So we have a big matrix EEG that is multiplied by a Kronecker product between a block weight associated to the channels and a block weight associated to the time dimension, where EEG here is in fact a specific unfolding of the tensor. So where here we are concatenating all of the different frontal slices. So here it's the whole frontal slices associated to the first channel, then the second one, etc., etc. Okay, so what is the interest into taking into account such a multi-way structure? So in fact, so first, it allows to actually deal with the multi-way structure. And there is also a first gain in interpretability because we can separately interpret like that the weights associated to each dimensions. Moreover, we can have tremendously less weights to estimate. So we can go from before J multiplied by K to only J plus K, because before we had, if we unfold the whole tensor, we have to estimate J multiplied by K elements, where here we are only estimating a block weight per mode. And in the end, we only have to estimate J plus K elements, and it can be tremendously lower. Okay, so, and in the end, how do I take into account this multi-way structure into the framework of RGCCA? In fact, I will simply, so as you can see, this is the optimization framework of RGCCA, where we have the constraints I was talking to you before. And here we simply had these Kronecker constraints for the different blocks that are organized as a tensor. And quickly, the idea of the algorithm mixes both what we call the block coordinate ascent. So it consists into maximizing this criterion according to only one block weight vector, keeping all the other fixed. And actually, this update, so once all the different block weights are fixed except one, as the optimization problem is still quite hard to solve, we use the minimize maximize principle, which consists in our case to linearize the function that we have to maximize and to solve this linearized version of the problem. The resulting solution is quite simple because in fact it's simply a singular value decomposition of a specific matrix of size K multiplied by J. And we can see that we have a global convergence of this algorithm, meaning that whatever the initialization, we will converge toward a stationary point. Okay, so if I go back to this table, in fact, if we add now a small modification in the constraints, then we get the method which is called multi-way generalized canonical correlation analysis, which can handle the cases where some of my blocks are actually organized as a tensor. Okay, so now we are going on to a small study, EEG study with actually this method, MGCCA, just to illustrate this method. So here, the goal of this study, so this study was performed as neurospin, and this study is on 25 infants, and the goal is to identify whether the infant's brain actually encoded some specific phonetic features that are known and defined by a linguist. So in order to perform such to fulfill such goals, so the EEG are used, and a set of 24 different phonemes is presented to the babies, one every second, during a session of 1 hour, and the EEG headset actually records the time samples at a frequency of 500 Hertz with 256 channels. So the different stimuli we are interested in are summarized in this table. So actually there are 24 different phonemes which are characterized by two phonetic features. So I recall that the goal here is to find a specific time and space characterization of this phonetic feature. So the first one is called the place of articulation, which characterize where the sound is generated. So either at the lip, or here, so either bilabial, alveolar, or velar, which specify where the sound is created. So here either at the lip, here or here at the beginning of the larynx. The other phonetic feature which is of interest is the manner of articulation, and actually specifies if either the larynx is open, is closed, or open. And so the different stimuli that are presented are composed of 6 different consonants, so v, de, g, or m, n, nye, that are followed by 2 possible vowels, so either I or O, and pronounced by either a female or a male voice. And so, for example, bm are bilabial, done are alveolar, and gne velar. And bdg is associated to the obstruent manner of articulation, and menenye to the sonorant manner of articulation. So here we will be particularly interested in distinguishing between the 2 possible manner of articulation, so obstruent or sonorant. And so our goal with MGCCA will be to try to understand if actually the infant brain is encoded the difference between the 2 manner of articulation and where it happens in time and space. So can we identify the specific brain areas where this difference is encoded, and where it happens in time also. Okay, so here I have my EEG data, composed of 25 subjects through approximately 800 time samples that are measured through 252 channels. And so if I take a slice like that of my tensor, this is actually what I'm looking at. So I have for the different electrodes time courses like that. Which is the time origins on which the different epochs are recorded. So what actually we did is we associated each tensor to a specific phoneme. So here B pronounced by a female, and we flipped these 2 dimensions. And so as we have 24 different phonemes, we have 24 different tensors, and the goal was to study the whole possible interaction between them. So we defined this set of network where all of the different tensors are connected. So here the goal, in fact, is to extract from each of the different tensors block components such that the different blocks are as much close as possible in time between the different phonemes. So in fact, we are going to extract these different block components such that we want them to be in time as close as possible, and then we will be able to analyze which where in space we had to find the different channel coefficients, which channel coefficients had to be found for the different phonemes in order to do so. Okay, so we applied MGCCI on such analysis, on such data set, and this is actually the results we obtain. So for the time dimension, so for the different, we have 24 tensors, so we have 24 elements associated to the time dimension, and it can be represented like that. So here I put I put them in the same order as the table before. So the first line is associated to Bödögger and the second line to Mononieu. So as you can see, this is quite hard to find any difference between the different time courses. But actually, if we do a t-test between all of the different these different time courses extracted, either between the first condition Bödögger and the second condition Mononieu, this is the results we obtained. So here we have the mean associated to the obstruent phonemes, and here the mean associated to the Sonoran phonemes. And actually, after correction, we can find significant differences that are localized, and we can localize these differences in time. And actually, when we it was those results were quite expected by neuroscientists, the neuroscientists we were working with. And then, so I can also look at the specific block weight vector associated to the channels. So again, I have each head represents a specific block weight vector associated to a specific phoneme. So again, it is quite hard to find any differences. But we applied also a t-test between, so here the first line associated to Bödögger, and here the second line associated to Mononieu. And this is here the specific channels that appears to be significantly different between the two. And this is quite interesting indeed, because we know that the processing of the language happens in the left part of the brain. So actually, we did the last ad hoc analysis just in order to represent the different phonemes in a common space. So actually, what we did is we created this matrix where each line is associated to a specific phoneme, and each phoneme is characterized both by its block component, which characterize the time, and its channel weight vector, which characterize the different channels. And then we applied a simple PCA on this table. So we applied actually this PCA on the output of MGCCA. So MGCCA allowed us to extract the time block components and the channel weight vectors. And then we defined the fact that each phoneme is represented by both the time block components and the channel weights vector extracted by MGCCA. And just in order to understand what is the position of the different phonemes with one another, we applied a PCA on this table, and this is the results we obtained. So actually, here we find two nice separation here between the manner of articulation. So here we have all of the obstruent phonemes that are on the left part, and all of the sonorant phonemes that are on the right part. So the first component characterizes the manner of articulation, and the second component characterizes characterizes the voice gender. Okay, so this is it for this study. And so for now, I presented you the framework of RGCCA for regularized generalized canonical correlation analysis, and a first extension that allows to handle the multi-way structure. Now, quickly, I will introduce you the sparse version of RGCCA before going on to the specific analysis we are interested in. So here again, what we want to extract from each block is a component, which is composed of a linear combination of the different variables. But this time, we had this specificity, which means that we want the block components that are built from sparse weight vectors. So why are we actually doing sparsity? So sparsity means actually that we want a lot of a small subset of variables that are actually implicated in the construction of this component. So when we enforce sparsity, it means that we want to perform variable selection and to identify only a subset of elements that are important in order here to construct the block components. So why to enforce such sparsity? For example, in biomedical data, lots of the time it is expected that only a small subset of the measurements are actually implicated in the process we are interested in. And moreover, it allows to simplify the interpretation of the output of RGCCA, because actually we want to identify only a subset of variables that are implicated, that are active in the relation with the other blocks. So how can we enforce such sparsity? So ideally, we wish to penalize by the number of variables taken into account into the model. But actually, this is really hard to solve, partially because then the problem is non-convex and there is a combinatorial burden. So a good alternative is to consider the L1 norm, which is convex and which is actually the absolute value, the sum of the absolute value of each element of the block weight vector. And so indeed, this is what was done in the framework of RGCCA. So again, you can see that there is the criterion with this specific constraints, and this L1 norm constraints was added in order to enforce sparsity. And so I can fulfill here the last line of this table, where here for the same criterion, this L1 norm constraint was added in order to perform sparse generalized canonical correlation analysis. Okay, so now, and it is possible also to show that the algorithm behind each of these different procedures, so RGCCA, MGCCA, and SGCCA, actually are gifted with good convergence property. So, for example, they are gifted with global convergency, meaning that whatever the starting point will converge towards a stationary point. Okay, so now we will go on to a specific analysis with SGCCA of a multi-omics study. So, Amazing.
Yeah, so maybe just before going on the result that we obtained with Arno on this method, I will just present you the data and present you the project that I'm working on in my PhD thesis. So Arno, if you could just allow me to share. I think that, I don't know if you can see my my screen right now. Okay, so for those of you which are not familiar with mood disorder and psychiatric disorder in general, just briefly introduce the mood disorders, and in particular the dataset that Arnaud and I are working on, which is the bipolar one. So basically, bipolar disorder are just defined as an alteration of two main episodes, when one of them, which is manic, and the other one is depressive, and then last for more than 2 weeks. In general, those who endorse bipolar disorder are accompanied with a lot of comorbidities like alcohol abuse and anxiety disorder, and which can quickly be a real burden for patients. So, and on this data set, the actual project was initiated on a subset of this population, which are those who endorse childhood trauma. So basically, it went from the study of Bruno Hautin, which described in his paper that mainly the bipolar patients that undergone childhood trauma have a tendency to be non-responders to the classical lithium-based treatment. So just to a quick definition on childhood trauma or CTs. So they are defined as a set of experiences that are resulting in either physical or psychological sequel, including two main type of traumas. Abuse, which is subset in three subtypes: physical abuse, psychological abuse, and sexual abuse. And neglect, which has two subset of traumas: physical one and psychological one. So basically, to go on the childhood trauma, so how we assess the childhood trauma in our cohorts. So we use a questionnaire, which is the childhood trauma questionnaire, which encapsulates 28 questions. And it's a score ranging from 25 to 125 with 5 graduations. Those graduations are those that I just presented before. So we have the 3 sub-traumas which are linked to abuse: emotional abuse, physical abuse, and sexual abuse. And 2 other scores, 2 other set of traumas, which are emotional neglect and physical neglect. So each of these subtypes are scored from 5 to 25 and have 5 graduations, so like very low or very high, and have these 5 graduations. And so at the total, we will have 8 scores, and from 5 of which are those of these 5 traumas, and 1 is a total, which is the sum of these 5 score, and another one which is the abuse CTQ score, which encapsulates which is the sum of these 3 abuse score, and the last one is the neglect one, which encapsulates the 2 last neglect subtype of CTQ. So the main project of the CT-SCAR is to identify blood molecular signature based based signature of childhood trauma in mood disorder patients. So we are using in the data set that we are presenting, we are using transcriptomic and epigenetic data. So RNA-seq and miRNA microRNAs. And this project is done with a really pluridisciplinary team led by Bruno Hautin, which is a psychiatrist which is specialized in mood disorders and bipolar disorder in particular, and also Raoul Belzo, and also encapsulates biologists like Dr. Cynthia Marie-Claire and El Sherif Ibrahim and Eduardo Gascon-Gonzalo, which work on the more biological model of both the bipolar disorder and also the major depressive disorder cohort that is generated in this project that I will not talk about talk about here. So mainly our objective here is to try to find a molecular signature of childhood trauma and in mood disorders using multi-omic integration. So we are supposing that by using more omic data, we will have a better chance to encapsulate and capture this subtle interaction which is going on in childhood trauma. So the bipolar data set that we have more than 150 patients. All of them are bipolar. We don't have controls for this cohort. And they are just data that we are generated from whole blood. And right now we have DNA methylation, miRNA, and mRNA data. Maybe in the near future, we'll also have SNPs. And basically what we are doing is using multi-omic approaches to integrate all this data and ultimately to be able to have patient stratification based on the childhood trauma. And in order to furthermore propose other treatments than those which are classically and mainly delivered in this kind of diseases, and maybe ones that better increase the response of the patient to the treatments. So in just to a quick reminder on multi-omic integration. So when we looked to multi-omic analysis in general in the literature, and more particularly on those that are done on mood disorders, we saw that mainly there's two types of multi-omic data integration. The first one, which is horizontal integration, and it is just and it is like we can see in and it consists of having the same type of omic from different cohorts and integrated with different tools. So which is presented here at the left of the slide. And the other one, which is more multi-view method, which consists of collecting different level of omics on the same cohort and then try to integrate it with different also method. So basically, the more common thing to do is the horizontal integration, which is easier to do because you don't have to monitor a big cohort and you just have to collect one type of omics. And the other one, which is more interesting because we can collect the same, the different views, different omics levels and layers of data on the same cohort, and which is more interesting and could give us more information on our study. So the data that we are working on is really the one that which is really on vertical data integration. So before letting Arnaud continue on the result that we recently worked on with this cohort, just to a quick reminder of the data we used. So we used the mRNA data and mRNA data on the bipolar cohort. Before that, the data, we undergone some pre-processing steps, mainly to identify the covariates and which could alter the our data, and we just correct for this co-founding covariates with a linear model. Basically, we identified four main covariates, which are age, BMI, sex, and RIN, which is just a technical measure assessing the quality of the RNA before the RNA in the library preparation before sequencing. And we have just a batch effect on the mRNA data. So those data had already undergone some omics or some classical data analysis on a single omic view so which is the general differentially expression analysis, and also a more advanced method, which is weighted correlated network analysis to extract co-expressed genes in our dataset. And we are also working on multi-omic integration using different tools like the one that just presented, Arno, RGCCA, Mixomics, and some network-based method. And ultimately, the result that we are obtaining in both multi-omics and single omics are enriched and combined in order just to understand better the childhood trauma in our cohort. So maybe Arno will show you the result that we had with this data set.
Okay. Thank you very much. So maybe just before continuing, is it okay? I'm really sorry about the music rehearsal. I don't know. Actually, I'm at school, but I was not planning on the students to rehearse tonight. So is it okay for you, or?
Yeah, don't worry.
Okay, for the sound, it's good.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
Okay, nice. So sorry for the disturbance. Share my screen again. Okay, so here, and then thank you, Amazik, for your presentation, and I'm going on now to some results with SGCCA on this particular data set. So here, actually, unfortunately, just a quick word before. I will not, in fact, show you big result on the explanation of childhood trauma scores with SGCCA. Unfortunately, this is still ongoing work, but actually we did a first test case study, which is actually quite nice to understand how this method works, and which aims actually to explain the gender of this particular in this particular data set, the gender of the different subjects. So here I'm going to develop the different steps of this analysis with this sparse version of RGCCA on this particular data set in order to explain the gender. And then I will go on to a small opening on the perspective and on the different improvements we should maybe try to do in order to improve the beginning results we had on the explanation of the childhood trauma score. So here we applied SGCCA on this particular data set, and what we wanted to explore was this set of interaction, meaning that we want to extract from each block a block component that both will represent its specific block, but also the interaction with all the different components. And here in a sparse version, so in a way that each component is composed of a specific subset of the different variables. So we applied here SGCCA, and after setting the different parameters, so the two sparse parameters, one for the microRNA block and one for the messenger RNA block, this is what we obtain. So here, what we are looking at, so actually we extracted two components per block. So two components for the microRNA block and two components for the messenger RNA block. And here, what am I looking at is for the microRNA block, so the first block, I'm looking at the sample or the individual space. So actually, I plotted here the first component against the second one. So as I could do in a PCA analysis, for example. And here the different individuals were colored by their gender. This is was also actually done for the second block, so the messenger RNA block. And so here we can see that the first components actually well explain the gender, particularly the first component associated to the messenger block. So here this is only actually there was a small mistake, but it's only the percentage actually of variables implicated into the computation of the first component here, and here the second component. Then in the output of so this is in the individual space. Then in the output of the GCCA and here SGCCA, I can also look at the variable space in order to better understand how the different components were computed. And here another possibility is to look actually at the so this is a correlation circle, and at the correlation between the different components. So sorry, the correlation between the different variables and each component. So here, for example, if I take this particular variable, it is represented by a correlation around 0.5 with the first component, but 0 with the second component. So we can understand here the link that is actually that actually exists between each extracted components and the different variables of the blocks. So here, so, yes.
There is a question from Pauline Favre.
Yes.
Does this mean that the control for sex in the pre-processing didn't work?
No, actually, for this particular specific test case study, it was not corrected for the sex. Just we corrected for everything. I mean, everything we corrected for BME, the RIN microRNA, RIN messenger mRNA, but not for the sex. And because afterwards we wanted to explain this particular variable. In a second study, where we wish to explain the CTQ scores, in fact, we corrected also for the sex.
Thank you.
Okay, and so I can like that understand how the different variables actually compose the different components extracted. So here for these two extracted components, I can plot also the same for the messenger RNA block actually, where again I plot the first component against the second. So this is a way to understand what actually bears the different components. Another possibility also that we actually did in this study. Another possibility also is to look actually at the correlation between the extracted component. So here I represented all the possible correlation. So here miRNA component 1 actually is the component, the first component associated to the block microRNA, the second component, and etc. Here for the messenger RNA, and first component, second component. And we can here understand also the different interaction that were extracted between the different components. And here I added also the correlation with the actual variable that we use to explain the sex here. So we can see that we have a strong correlation with the variables we actually want to explain, but also that we have strong correlation between the extracted variables. So here, for example, the first component of the microRNA with the first component of the messenger RNA. Okay, so a last step also in this study. So first, after setting the different sparse parameters, we applied SGCCA and we interpret with different figures the results. So individual space, we can indeed see that we have extracted some things that bear the information of the gender. We can understand how these different components are what actually the different variables that actually well represent, and also the interaction that actually exists between these extracted variables. A last step into this study that we wish also to perform and then to go on for the CTQ, the childhood trauma scores, lies at understanding the robustness into the models that were computed. And actually, in order to do that, we use Bootstrap. So what actually a quick introduction onto into the Bootstrap principle. So here we have the original data set, and so which is composed of 2 different blocks. And here I can say that in fact, just to simplify the talk, I can say that in fact I have only 7 subjects. And what I will do is to repeatedly apply the method of SGCCA on random sampling of the subject with replacement, meaning that I will each time create a specific Bootstrap sample, which is composed of the same blocks, but with different subjects. So each time I want as many subjects as there is in the original data set, but each subject can be repeated. And we apply like that I will sample like that a great number of times this original data set, and each time apply SGCCA, and then I will look at some summary information of the different application of this method in order to understand the robustness of the selected variables. So here, so just to better understand what I'm doing with some figures. So let's say that I have 7 different subjects. So my first Bootstrap sample would be composed of those subjects. So actually I randomly extracted 7 subjects with replacement. So I have the first subject that is repeated 2 times, the 5th one also. Then I apply SGCCA on this particular data set. So actually for each different blocks, I added the superscript B1 in order to specify that is associated to this set of subjects. And then for this Bootstrap sample, I can, for the different component, have a set of selected variables. So I have a specific set of variables for the first component of microRNA, second component of microRNA, first component of messenger RNA, second component for messenger RNA. I repeat the same stuff for the second Bootstrap sample. So this time the subject number 7 is repeated 3 times, and I do not have, for example, the subject number 4 or 5. And then I apply SGCCA on this second Bootstrap sample, and I will extract again some set of selected variables for the different components. And actually, I repeat that potentially a high number of times, so around, for example, 500 samples. And so we did that in this small test case study in order to explain the gender. And actually, we retain only, so we did 500 Bootstrap samples, and we retain only the most robust variables. And how do I define robust here? So we decided that it was the variable that was selected more than 95% of the time, which is associated to 475 times. And so this is the set of actually messenger RNA and microRNA that were selected. So that was actually considered selected, and where their selection was considered actually as robust. And so here this is the different names of the variables that were selected, the gene associated, the description of the gene, and the chromosome where they can be found. So I will not spend much time on this result, but just to, I mean, actually this is a quite easy test case study, but this is quite interesting to see that in the end, and this is quite a relief that we extracted mainly variables that are located on the Y and X chromosome. Okay, so currently we are trying to go from this test case study to the explanation of the childhood trauma questionnaire. And actually, we did already some analyses that are going toward this explanation. So actually, the same we are taking the same different step for the analysis. So first, we define a procedure to set the different sparse parameters. Then, with these optimal sparse parameters, we apply the SGCCA, and finally, we try to evaluate the robustness of the selected variables of the computed models. So by bootstrapping. However, in this case, I will not show you particular figures, but it is quite harder to set the sparse parameters. We have a poor generalization properties of the models that are computed. Actually, they tend to select the best models in terms of generalization are associated to the models where we have a strong sparsity, but really strong. So where we select only a few number of variables per block, and then it was expected. So as we are selecting only around 10 or 20 variables per block, in fact, the results are not stable enough. When we do this bootstrap procedure and we repeat 500 times this analysis, even 1,000 times, the occurrence of the different selected variables is quite low. So we still have some maybe hints in order to improve those results. Actually, here, in order to set the different parameters, we are based on some predictive power. So we wish to well predict either the CETU score or some groups based on the CETQ scores. Actually, we can work on this task, maybe to find different way to predict the CETQ score of these CETQ groups, or also have a thinner grid of the different sparse parameters to set. But actually, those results tend to take us towards finding more ways actually to stabilize the results. And in order to do that, actually, a first possibility also is to so it's what I was saying before, but in order to use predictive power, so of the CETQ, we can use what we call the permutation. So quickly, in fact, what is this way of setting the parameters? Actually, if we have only 2 blocks, you will randomly permute the different subjects in a specific block, which will hopefully destroy the correlation links that can be existing between the 2 blocks. And you will repeat that large number of times. Each time you will compute actually the correlation that does exist between the 2 blocks. And in the end, you will compare the correlation that exists between your 2 blocks with the non-permuted data set. And you wish that this correlation is significantly higher than the whole different times you computed this correlation with permutation. And you repeat that for different values of parameters, and you wish to set the parameters to a specific value where you have like that a significant different value when you are not permuting versus when you are permuting. But other ways in order to stabilize the result is to insert more knowledge into your data set. So in fact, for example, what we can call a divide and conquer strategy. So for example, it could be interesting to split the messenger RNA block into as many blocks as there are, for example, functional category. So here, this block is composed of 30,000 variables. So it can be decomposed into many smaller blocks, or actually also enrich the bootstrap results. And not looking at the output as the number of the occurrence of a specific selected variables, but of a specific selected functional category. So, for example, one variable can be selected 100 times, another variable 100 times also, but they are both associated to the same functional category. So we say that this functional category, in fact, is selected 200 times. So it can allows to see differently the robustness that actually exists in your data set, and also to enrich your output. And a last possibility also is to insert more structures actually in the way sparsity is performed. So just on this last point, what actually I mean by structured sparsity. So for example, let's say that we have like that variables. So here I have a specific grid where each square is associated to a variable. And so as you see, there is some specific proximity. So we can define that, we can say that this variable is close to this one. To this one, there is for each variable, I can define a specific neighbors. If on this specific organization of the variables, I apply a selection according to the lasso, so according to which consists into penalizing your model with the L1 norm, so the norm that we have seen here today. This could be the output. So we can, like that, select interesting variable into your model, but without looking at their possible proximity or their possible neighbors. So this is completely blind. We are not taking into account the fact that there is another structure in the data, which is a proximity structure in terms of space. So actually, in order to enforce more structure in the way variable selection is performed, we can, like that, in this specific example, use a total variation of our GraphNet, which actually will specify the fact that for each variable, we can define some neighbors. So this is particularly interesting, for example, in neuroimaging, where we wish to select some part, so some smooth parts of the brain that are implicated in a specific phenomenon. And also here, I was talking about the proximity in terms of 2D space, but this proximity can be actually defined in a network. Okay, so here today I presented you the RGCCR framework, which is basically made of this function to optimize. And when we play with the different constraints, actually it allows to handle different structures in the data. So the multi-block structure, the multi-block and multi-way structure, and the multi-block and sparse structure. So this is actually a quite general framework that allows like that to to take into account different specificity of the data. And currently, we are working with Amazigh in a specific case of the sparse version of this framework, in order to better understand the links that could exist between a microRNA and messenger RNA, in order to understand childhood trauma. There is actually a R package which is associated to this framework. This package is called RGCCA, and we are currently working on the next release of it, that is available on GitHub actually, and soon on the CRAN, where the different pedagogical development I was presenting will be included, and also some more developments that allows to endorse missing values, for example, with the Nepal's algorithm, to set the different parameters with some permutation procedure. So I was quickly talking to you about this point, and also to provide some confidence intervals on the coefficients, or some confidence on the robustness of the selection of the coefficients through some bootstrap procedure. In this framework, actually, there are quite some perspectives that can be developed. In fact, here, what I only presented you some cases where there is only the third order tensor, but actually we can work with a higher order tensor if needed. The questions are just a little more complex. I was not really talking about that today, but actually I was mainly speaking about how to extract the first component, and in the way it is done in the RGCCA framework, it was performed sequentially, meaning that the first component is extracted, and as in some other multi-block methods, the data actually are projected into the orthogonal space of the first component, and then into with this projected data set, the algorithm is applied again in order to extract the second component. Actually, during my thesis, I worked on what we call a global procedure, which allows to extract all the components simultaneously. And this is particularly interesting, first in terms of optimization, because it is more optimal to extract the different components simultaneously. And also it allows to enforce more structures through the different components. Another interesting part also is to find some ways. For now, the network of connection between the blocks is set by the user, but it could be interesting actually to estimate this network, and also to change maybe this link, because for now it is a link of correlation or covariance, which is actually undirected, but it could be interesting to try to see if it's possible to add some causality into these links. Also, it could be interesting to develop some sparse and multi-way methods, which could be interesting, for example, in some data set, for example, the Alzheimer's Disease Neuroimaging Initiative, where we want to find in the 3D images of anatomical MRA some specific parts of this 3D image that are linked to some combination of genes. And finally, develop a probabilistic version maybe of this framework. So this is it for me. Thank you for your attention. And if you have questions, I will be pleased to answer them.
Thank you very much. It was really a great presentation. Maybe if I can initiate with the questions. For me, like I have been using in my thesis when I have issues when I need to integrate different blocks, I'm simply using stacking and use each block to predict and then stack the predictors and get another predictor. How does it compare in terms of performance, for instance? Have you tried to compare the strategies before?
So I have not particularly tried to compare them. In a specific case, it could be actually the results could be quite close. But what allows RGCCA to do, I mean, the fact that we take into account the different blocks is to better have a better possibility to interpret the results. So you could understand the link between the different modalities, the different variables that actually are active into this link, which is not the case when where you will stack everything. But purely in terms of predictive or predictive power, I cannot tell you, I cannot assure you that it will be better. But actually, it could be still it could be easier to set the different parameters because you are actually splitting the different variables into different blocks, and you are associating a specific, for example, in the sparse version, you are actually selecting variables in each of the different subsets. And actually, sometimes when you stack everything, you can have a whole block that will that will represent the biggest variance in your data set. And when you apply sparsity in this case, only variables in this block could be selected. And then you lose, as they are quite hard to compare like that, you lose the idea to perform a multimodality here. Whereas in this framework, you will select, you are sure that you will select variables from each of the different blocks.
Okay, thank you. I think interpretability is very, very important. So
yes,
I'm looking forward to using your algorithm.
Thank you. And actually, yes, this is what we are mainly focusing on to better enhance the possibility to interpret and better understand the output of this type of algorithm.
Arnaud, I have a question, if I may.
Yes.
So first, thanks to you and Amazir for the presentation. It was really, really great. I have a question about what you talked about in the end about introducing some structure in the sparsity. So you showed an image about brain imaging.
Yes.
And then you showed something about networks. So this is something we already discussed very briefly with André Delahaye. It's true that I would feel a bit uncomfortable with using WGCNA to inform this sparsity. But there is another possibility that I'm wondering if you ever saw that in the literature, which would be to use basically the genomic space in a way, right? So for example, the proximity between genes or between mRNA genes and microRNA genes. And I'm thinking about that, especially because, as you probably know, we also have generated DNA methylation data on this cohort, right? So when we integrate this third data set, I think it's going to be probably very interesting to consider basically the genomic location of the different features that we try to integrate. So I was just wondering if you have seen in the literature some attempts at using this kind of information.
Yes. So indeed, this is what some colleagues did at Neurospin. So actually, Nicolas Guigui and Cathy Philippe and Vincent Froin. I was also a little part of this work, and they applied some structured sparsity. So in order in the Alzheimer's disease neuroimaging initiative, they took three blocks. So the first block was some extracted neuroimaging features. The second block was a genetic one, which was composed of aggregated SNPs. SNPs were, I mean, we can discuss about that maybe later, but SNPs were aggregated. They had a specific procedure to aggregate them into genes. And then the last one was actually the diagnosis, and they wish to explain this diagnosis. And they had a specific constraints on the genetic block, which is a network constraints. And they say that the different genes were closed. They define some neighbors of the different gene into a specific network. And this network, I have to find again how they extracted it, but it was, I mean, on a general gene basis that they extracted on a specific database. I can find again the name of these networks, but they use that in order to define the proximity of the different genes. And actually, they had a small improvement in order to explain the difference between Alzheimer and control. So they tried. They compared the results on the first with only the first the neuroimaging blocks, then the neuroimaging and the genetic, and then they had some network constraints on this genetic block. Actually, and just about the algorithm, the algorithm is based on was developed by this algorithm in order to perform structure sparsity was developed by Tommy and co-authors and is based on proximity operators. And also during my thesis, I work on a quite similar algorithm, but based on another principle, and we are still working on this and comparing the two algorithms.
Thanks. That's I think it's a very interesting
I can send you
avenue that we should pursue. Yeah.
I can send you actually the paper if you want.
Yeah, please. Not only based on simple genomic proximity, but also based on possibly more complex organization and chromatin structure and things like that, because there are now more and more databases that start to document such more complex interactions. So thanks.
No problem.
I have another question. So
Yes.
here you predicted sex.
Yes.
Is it possible then to somehow subtract the sex information in order to then correct when you will want to predict childhood trauma, for instance?
You mean use the output of this analysis in order to correct for the...
Yes.
This is a good idea. Actually, yes, it could be defined as a way, I mean, the components extracted, if we identify the ones that are, if you only put aside the ones that explain sex, we could use them in order to project the data into another space where the gender is corrected. It is possible. Actually, I think the burden is quite high in order to perform such correction. And I think, I'm not sure, but it may be a bit, I mean, it's the computation burden is high comparing to maybe the improvement, but it is indeed possible, yes.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Are there any questions? Other questions, I mean.
I don't have question really on my side, but I wanted to thank Arnaud for his presentation. It was super clear, and thank you for your input with the analysis we are doing on the data. Yeah, we have a lot of idea now with how to go with this analysis. For you, what are the next steps we can have with Amazier for the analysis using sparsity version of RGCCA?
I think first we can have to make sure that in this particular organization of the data set, so the three different blocks, microRNA and messenger RNA, linked to the explanation to a third block that, which is a clinical block. We may be sure that actually it's close to I mean close to impossible to extract a strong link and a robust and stable link between them in order to explain the CTQ score. So it goes by to better improve the cross-validation procedure, even though we tried actually around 4,000 set of parameters, but actually we can try to extract more components and also define the different ways of measuring the predictive power when we are dealing with the CTQ, but maybe not spend too much time on this part, because we already actually quite dig into that, and we did not find any robust information. And I think afterwards we may have to try to enforce more structure into the dataset. So either splitting, I mean, either really decrease the number of messenger RNA, or splitting it into different number of blocks, or enforcing different type of sparsity with, for example, the group lasso, defining different groups and selecting at the level of the groups, etc., etc. So I think quick first part to be sure that we did not miss anything, and after maybe try to include more knowledge into the data. Also here it could be interesting maybe to include more subjects, because from what I remember, here I was working on the bipolar patients. It could be maybe also interesting to include the patient that suffers from mood depression, in order to see with this organization of the dataset if it's possible to extract some components that will explain this diagnosis.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions?
Maybe,
okay. Well,
maybe just one, just a comment, because it's not really a question. It was very, very impressive presentation. I was just wondering, because I'm quite not in this field, actually. I'm a psychologist, and we use a lot of techniques in the network analysis world, which is quite similar. There's some techniques that looks like the same, but which are also different. So I was wondering if there was any bridges between these worlds, or because there's also points about sparsity, points about regularization techniques like lasso penalization and bootstrapping, so to get the parameters right and robust. So just wondering if you've encountered those kind of techniques. I'm thinking about a group in Amsterdam with Sechheitskamp and the package Bootnet and Psychometrics. Just a curious question.
Okay. Actually, the different methods, so bootnets, I do not know particularly about them, but I would be pleased to talk about that. But indeed, actually, this type of multi-block analysis was firstly built by people that were at the frontier of psychology and data analysis, with people like Yoshio Takan at McGill or Kears, which is, I think, in the Netherlands, Smilde. So this type of methods was indeed firstly well developed for psychometrics, and was not particularly geared for to handle high dimensionality, and more they are enhanced and extended in order to handle this type of data set. So yes, indeed, there could be some strong links, and I will be pleased to talk with you about that. I don't know them, this one particularly, but I'm sure there are some close relation between them.
If I may add to your answer, Arnaud, there is also a lot of network-based method that we are using on this data set, like WGCNA, which is remotely based on some network science and tries to capture the co-expressed genes in our data set and sum it up in terms of modules or subnetworks of genes. And we are trying to link these subnetworks to CTQ and other clinical covariates, and then enrich these modules and these networks with other data from the literature and other omics level. So yeah, basically we are using a lot of these kinds of data in this field.
Well, thank you very much, and congratulations on the developing our package. It's really great.
Actually, we are kind of in the debug mode right now, in order to merge the different developments. So thank you. It's quite interesting to provide the community with such package.
Okay, wonderful. So thank you again for having agreed to do this wonderful presentation, and it was really, really clear. So it's really inspiring. I suppose if there aren't any other questions, we're finished for today. We'll do a new presentation from now in 2 months. So it should probably be also around this hour, the third Thursday, but we'll keep you in touch by email. And obviously, if any of your teams want to or have ideas of methods they want to present, please just answer by email, and we'll be happy to attend. So again, thank you very much, Arnaud and Amazik.
Thank you very much, Anton.
Thank you.
And thank you, Anton, for organizing.
Thank you, Anton.
You're welcome. I didn't do anything.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
See you.
Bye-bye.
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 Pleasure. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.